Subscribe to the channel, and if you've ever sacrificed everything for people who still made you feel like an outsider, let me know your story in the comments. My name is Ethan. I'm 45 years old, and for most of my life I believed that if a man worked hard enough, stayed honest enough, and kept showing up day after day, eventually people would see his heart. I know better now. I own a small HVAC company. Nothing flashy. No fleet of shiny trucks with my face plastered across the sides. Just 6 employees, 2 service vans that always seemed to need repairs at the worst possible time, and customers who trusted me because I answered my phone when everyone else let theirs ring. The work wasn't glamorous. It was attics in July that felt like ovens. Crawl spaces soaked with standing water. Emergency furnace calls at 2 in the morning, while snow buried the roads. But every invoice I earned carried something more valuable than money. It carried pride. I built that company from nothing. No inheritance. No wealthy parents. No lucky break. Just 20 years of sweat, broken knuckles, skipped vacations, and the stubborn refusal to quit. By the time I met Nicole, life had finally settled into something resembling peace. She walked into my life carrying more than a smile. She carried history. She was 39, recently divorced, raising 2 children on her own. Her son, Carter, had just turned 14. Her daughter, Avery, was 12. They weren't bad kids. Not then. Just cautious. Quiet. Still trying to understand why one man had disappeared from their home while another suddenly wanted to eat dinner at their table. I never tried to replace their father. That mistake is one too many stepfathers make. You cannot erase blood. You cannot demand love. You earn trust. At least, that's what I believed. So I took my time. When Nicole and I got married a year later, I never asked the kids to call me Dad. I told them my first name was enough. If they wanted something more someday, it had to come from them. Not from me. Looking back, maybe that was the last truly hopeful thing I ever believed. Our first years together weren't easy. Nicole worked hard, but being a single mother for so long had left her buried under debts she never talked about unless another bill arrived in the mail. Medical bills. Credit cards. The mortgage she'd fallen behind on after the divorce. I didn't rescue her because I thought she'd owe me. I helped because that's what husbands do. Or at least what I thought husbands did. Within 2 years, my income carried nearly everything. Mortgage. Utilities. Groceries. Insurance. Property taxes. The kids never knew when another appliance broke because I replaced it before they came home from school. The air conditioner died during one brutal summer. I installed a new system myself over an entire weekend. Nobody asked? Nobody thanked me. I didn't expect them to. Families aren't businesses. You don't keep score. At least, you shouldn't have to. As Carter got older, expenses multiplied. Football equipment. Driving lessons. A used pickup for his 16th birthday. Nicole worried we couldn't afford it. I bought it anyway. Not because he asked. Because I remembered being 16. I remembered what freedom felt like the first time I held my own keys. When Avery made varsity volleyball, I rearranged service calls just to make her matches. Half the time she barely noticed I was sitting in the bleachers. Didn't matter. I still went. Birthdays. School trips. Prom dresses. Laptop computers. College savings. Family vacations. Every Christmas looked a little bigger because I'd quietly worked extra weekends in November. Nicole would squeeze my hand after everyone opened presents. "You always do too much." I'd smile. "I like seeing you all happy." And I meant it. Every word. People think sacrifice feels heavy. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it feels like purpose. Every overtime job. Every emergency repair. Every check I signed. I told myself I wasn't buying affection. I was building a family. Brick by brick. Year after year. One act of consistency at a time. Nicole often said I was the steady one. The dependable one. The kids may not say it. She tell me while we clean the kitchen after dinner. But they notice everything you do. Those words carried me through more nights than she'll ever know. Because Carter. He was changing. Slowly. So slowly I almost convinced myself I imagined it. At first it was harmless. He'd introduce Nicole as his mom. Avery as his sister. Then he'd pause when people looked at me. This is Ethan. Not my stepdad. Not family. Just Ethan. I ignored it. Teenagers are awkward. Then he stopped eating dinner with us unless Nicole insisted. When relatives visited, he'd disappear upstairs. If someone thanked me for fixing something around the house, Carter would shrug. He likes doing that. Likes. As though rebuilding the deck over 3 weekends was a hobby. As though paying for his life required nothing from mine. Little moments. Tiny cuts. Each one too small to argue over. Too small to confront. But cuts add up. One afternoon I overheard him talking with one of his friends in the driveway. His friend asked if I'd grounded him over missing curfew. Carter laughed. He can't ground me. Why not? Because he isn't actually family. The words drifted through the open garage. I stood there holding a socket wrench in my hand. Frozen. He never knew I'd heard him. I didn't say anything. Instead, I finished changing the brakes on his truck. That night Nicole noticed I'd become unusually quiet. You okay? Long day. You sure? I smiled. Just tired. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was exhausted. Not from work. From hoping. Because hope can become heavier than concrete when you carry it for years. Still, I convinced myself time would fix everything. Carter would grow up. He'd mature. One day he'd look back and understand who stayed. Who paid. Who showed up. Who never missed a game. Who answered every midnight phone call. Who kept the lights on. I believed gratitude simply needed time. I had no idea that, while I was building a home, someone else was quietly building a plan to destroy me. The first police car arrived on a Thursday evening. I remember the color of the sky more clearly than I remember the officers' faces. It was the dull gray of cooling steel, with rain suspended in the clouds but refusing to fall. I had just parked my service van when I saw 2 cruisers blocking the driveway and Nicole standing on the porch with her arms folded tightly across her chest. Carter stood behind her. He was watching me. Not with fear. With anticipation. I climbed out slowly, still wearing my work boots and the navy shirt with my company name stitched above the pocket. My hands smelled of copper pipe, machine oil, and the burned dust of an old furnace I had repaired that afternoon. One of the officers approached me. Ethan Mercer? Yes. We need to ask you some questions about an incident at the Holloway's residence. The Holloways lived 3 houses down. David traveled constantly for work, and his wife, Margaret, collected jewelry the way some people collected photographs. Nicole had mentioned her pieces before. Diamond bracelets. Antique necklaces. Rings inherited from a grandmother who had survived 2 wars. I looked toward their house. Yellow light glowed behind the curtains. What incident? The officer studied me before answering. Several items were reported stolen this afternoon. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because nothing about the question made sense. I was working all afternoon. We understand. But a witness says he saw you leaving the Holloway's property shortly before the theft was discovered. The world became very still. A lawn sprinkler clicked somewhere across the street. Water struck pavement in a slow, mechanical rhythm. Behind the officer, Nicole lowered her eyes. I already knew. Still, I made myself ask. Who says that? The officer glanced toward the porch. Carter stepped forward. He did not look uncertain. He did not look ashamed. He looked composed, almost proud of how calmly he could deliver the lie. I saw you, he said. You came out through their side gate carrying something under your jacket. For several seconds, I could not breathe. This was the boy whose first truck I had bought. The boy I had once driven through a snowstorm to pick up after he wrecked that truck in a ditch. The boy whose hospital bed I had slept beside when his appendix ruptured. He looked at me as though none of it had happened. "Carter," I said, "where were you standing?" "Near our garage." "At what time?" "About 3:30. "And you are certain it was me?" His mouth tightened into the beginning of a smile. "Yes." That smile told me everything. This was not confusion. It was not panic. It was not a frightened teenager filling gaps in his memory. It was deliberate. Nicole finally looked at me. I waited for outrage. I waited for her to step between us and tell the officers that her son had to be mistaken. I waited for the woman who had slept beside me for 6 years to remember the man she had married. Instead, she asked, "Ethan, did you go inside their house?" Her question hurt more than Carter's accusation. He was 17 and cruel. She was my wife. "No. But you've repaired their furnace before." "Yes." "So you know the alarm code?" I stared at her. The officers heard it too. I saw the shift in their posture, the subtle attention that follows a useful detail. "I knew an old service code," I said. "That doesn't mean I used it." Nicole pressed her lips together. "Not belief. Not loyalty. Calculation. The police asked permission to search my van. I gave it. They opened toolboxes, lifted seat cushions, inspected plastic bins filled with fittings and wire. Neighbors watched from windows while the name of my company sat beneath flashing red and blue lights. They found nothing. That should have mattered. It didn't. The accusation had already entered the air, and suspicion spreads faster than smoke. The next morning, 2 customers canceled appointments. By noon, an employee asked whether he should start looking for another job. Someone posted online that the owner of Mercer Heating and Air was being investigated for burglary. I watched 20 years of honest labor begin to rot in a single day. Carter went to school as though nothing had happened. Avery avoided me entirely. When I entered the kitchen, she carried her breakfast upstairs. When I passed her in the hallway, she pressed herself against the wall as though I might steal the earrings from her ears. Nicole said she needed time. That was the phrase she used. "I need time to understand this." I stood across from her in the bedroom I had renovated with my own hands. Understand what? Why Carter would say it if it wasn't true. There it was. Not whether he had lied. Why I had given him a reason to tell the truth. She slept in the guest room that night. I remained awake until dawn, listening to the furnace cycle on and off beneath the floorboards. I had installed it 3 winters earlier after the old unit cracked. Nobody else in the house knew how close they had come to carbon monoxide poisoning. They slept safely because of me. And now they feared me. The detectives returned with a warrant 2 days later. They searched my office, photographed my bank statements, and carried away my laptop. They asked about debts, insurance, gambling, and whether I had ever handled Margaret Holloway's jewelry during previous service visits. Every question treated guilt as the starting point. Carter repeated his story. Then he improved it. He claimed he had confronted me near the driveway. He said I warned him to stay silent. He described a velvet pouch beneath my jacket and insisted he saw part of a gold chain hanging from it. Details? Too many details. That was his mistake. A true memory remains imperfect. His story became sharper every time he told it, as if someone were polishing a blade. I began writing down every version. Times. Phrases. Changes. I requested copies of the reports through my attorney. I downloaded service records from the company server before the police could seize anything else. I preserved text messages, vehicle logs, invoices, and call histories. Nicole interpreted my silence as defeat. Carter interpreted it as fear. At dinner, I caught him exchanging a glance with Avery. She smirked into her glass. Nicole saw it and said nothing. That was when I understood that Carter had not acted alone in spirit, even if he had acted alone in fact. They wanted me gone. Perhaps Avery only enjoyed watching me fall. Perhaps Nicole had already chosen her children over the truth. The distinction no longer mattered. A family is not destroyed when strangers attack it. It is destroyed when the people inside decide one member is expendable. The prosecutor filed charges 3 weeks later. Burglary. Grand larceny. Possession of stolen property, though nothing had been found in my home, vehicle, office, or accounts. The jewelry was still missing. The newspapers printed my name anyway. On the morning of my arraignment, Carter wore the jacket I had bought him for Christmas. Nicole sat beside him. Avery sat on her other side. Together they looked like a wounded family seeking justice from the man who had betrayed them. I stood alone beside my attorney. Carter glanced at me across the courtroom. Then he smiled again. He believed the ending had already been written. He did not know that my service van recorded its location every 30 seconds. He did not know the Holloway's new security system stored deleted footage in a remote archive. And he did not know that I had recovered one message from a device he thought I had never seen. I lowered my eyes and let him enjoy his victory. For the moment. The trial began 4 months after the police first came to my house. By then, I had learned how quickly a man can become a stranger to his own name. Customers who had trusted me for years stopped returning calls. A supplier reduced my credit line. One of my technicians resigned because his wife did not want him associated with an accused thief. Every morning, I unlocked the office and looked at the empty desks, the silent phones, the company logo on the wall. Mercer Heating and Air. My name. My life. Both dragged through mud by a boy who had eaten at my table. Nicole never apologized for doubting me. She said the situation was complicated. She said she had to protect her children. She said a mother could not ignore her son when he claimed he had witnessed the crime. I asked her whether a wife could ignore her husband when he claimed he was innocent. She had no answer. On the first day of testimony, she sat behind the prosecutor with Carter and Avery. Carter wore a dark suit I had paid for months earlier, when Nicole insisted he needed something appropriate for college interviews. Avery kept whispering in his ear. Each time she did, he fought back a smile. They thought court was a theater. They thought I was there to be humiliated. The prosecutor described me as a financially strained business owner who had access to the Holloway's home and knowledge of their security system. He spoke slowly, arranging ordinary facts into something ugly. My company had lost 2 commercial contracts. I had repaired the Holloway's furnace. I knew where Margaret kept a spare key. None of that proved theft. But proof was not his first weapon. Suspicion was. Then Carter took the stand. I watched him raise his right hand and swear to tell the truth. He did not tremble. He told the jury he had been returning from a friend's house when he saw me step through the Holloway's side gate. He said my jacket looked swollen, as though something was hidden beneath it. He claimed a gold chain slipped from a velvet pouch near my waist. The prosecutor asked what happened next. Carter lowered his eyes. It was a good performance. He saw me, Carter said. He told me I should forget what I saw. He said nobody would believe me over him. Nicole covered her mouth. Avery stared at me with disgust rehearsed so carefully it almost looked real. The prosecutor asked whether Carter felt threatened. Yes. One word. Soft. Devastating. I looked at the jury and saw what he wanted me to see. They believed him. Not all of them. But enough. My attorney leaned toward me and whispered that we could attack the inconsistencies immediately. I shook my head. Let him finish. Carter continued building the lie until it became too large to carry. He gave a precise time. 3:37 in the afternoon. He described my clothes. Blue work shirt. Gray jacket. Black boots. He described my van parked across the street. He even claimed he heard the Holloway's gate latch close behind me. When my attorney began cross-examination, he asked Carter whether there was any possibility he had mistaken another man for me. No. Any possibility the time was different? No. Any possibility you were somewhere else that afternoon? Carter looked directly at me. No. That answer was the door closing behind him. My attorney returned to our table and placed a hand on the folder in front of him. I had kept that folder sealed through every hearing. Nicole had asked what evidence I possessed. I refused to tell her. Carter had mocked me for pretending I had some secret weapon. I did. The first exhibit was the tracking history from my service van. Every company vehicle used a commercial fleet system for insurance and dispatch. It recorded location, ignition status, speed, and stops in 30-second intervals. At 3:37 that afternoon, my van was 28 miles away. The prosecutor objected. The judge allowed the records. My attorney called the fleet manager, who confirmed the data came directly from the provider's secured server and could not be altered through my company account. The map appeared on the courtroom screen. A blue line showed my route from a nursing home where I had replaced a failed compressor to a warehouse where I purchased refrigerant. Not the Holloway's house. Not my street. 28 miles away. Carter's face changed. Only slightly. But I saw it. The confidence left his eyes before it left his mouth. The prosecutor argued that I could have left the van elsewhere and driven another vehicle. My attorney nodded as though he had expected the claim. Then he presented the nursing home's security footage. At 3:34, I appeared in the rear service corridor carrying my tools. At 3:38, I signed a work order beside the maintenance director. At 3:42, I exited through the loading entrance and walked toward my van. The timestamps were verified by the building's security contractor. There was no way I could have been at the Holloway's home. A murmur passed through the courtroom. Nicole stopped covering her mouth. Carter looked toward the prosecutor. For help. There was none. My attorney turned back to him. You testified that you saw Mr. Mercer at 3:37. Yes. You were certain. I might have been wrong about the exact time. But moments ago, you said there was no possibility the time was different. I was nervous. My attorney allowed the silence to stretch. Then he asked the question that mattered. Where were you at 3:37? Carter swallowed. Near home. The second exhibit appeared. Phone location records placed Carter 6 miles away, at a shopping center near the highway. His device connected to public Wi-Fi at a coffee shop at 3:29. A receipt from his digital wallet showed he purchased 2 drinks at 3:35. One for him. One for Mason Reed, a friend Nicole had banned from our house after catching him selling stolen electronics at school. Carter stared at the screen. Avery's face strained of color. That was when I knew she had known more than she admitted. My attorney was not finished. The Holloway security company had restored footage deleted from the local recording unit. The cameras had captured 2 hooded figures entering through the rear gate shortly after 4. One used a code. The other carried an empty backpack. The taller figure limped slightly on his left leg. Carter had injured that leg during football practice. The footage was grainy. The messages were not. Mason had sold an old tablet to one of my employees weeks before the theft. He had forgotten the device remained synchronized to his messaging account. After my arrest, notifications began appearing on it. My employee brought it to me. I preserved everything. The courtroom screen filled with Carter's words. Make sure Ethan takes the fall. Mom already thinks he hides money. Once he is gone, she will divorce him. Then the house is ours again. Nobody spoke. Not the prosecutor. Not Nicole. Not Avery. Carter stared at the messages as though he could erase them by refusing to blink. Another appeared. Avery says Mom will believe us if we stay calm. The smugness vanished from all 3 of their faces at once. I did not smile. Victory did not feel warm. It felt like standing in the ashes of my own home and proving I had not lit the match. The judge dismissed the charges against me before the day ended. The prosecutor announced that a new investigation would begin immediately. Carter was taken from the courtroom through a side door. Nicole called my name. I kept walking. For months she had asked why her son would lie. Now she had the answer. He wanted me gone. And the worst part was that she had helped him believe it could work. Freedom did not arrive with relief. It arrived with silence. When I stepped through the courthouse doors, reporters shouted my name as though they had been cheering for me all along. Cameras turned. Microphones stretched toward my face. The same people who had printed headlines questioning my character suddenly wanted a statement about justice, betrayal, and forgiveness. I ignored every one of them. They had built stories out of suspicion. Now they wanted another story built from my pain. The afternoon air felt strangely cold despite the summer heat. I crossed the parking lot alone, unlocked my truck, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. My hands rested on the steering wheel for several minutes while the courthouse disappeared in the rearview mirror. 20 years. That company had taken 20 years to build. 4 months had nearly destroyed it. No judge could return those months. No verdict could restore the contracts I had lost, the employees who had quit, or the customers who had quietly chosen another contractor because my name had become inconvenient. Vindication is not the same thing as restoration. People rarely understand that. Someone knocked softly against my driver's window. Nicole. Her mascara had run down both cheeks. The confidence she carried into the courtroom was gone, replaced by the exhausted face of a woman who had finally watched certainty collapse beneath her feet. I lowered the window halfway. Ethan. Her voice broke before she finished my name. I'm sorry. I looked at her for a long moment. Those 2 words had once meant everything to me. Now they sounded painfully small. You believed him. I was confused. You believed him. I didn't know what to think. You never asked what I knew. Tears rolled down her face. I thought. I nodded. I know what you thought. She reached toward the window, but I leaned back before her hand could touch mine. It wasn't just Carter, I said quietly. Her expression tightened. You questioned me before the police ever did. I was scared. So was I. She lowered her eyes. For the first time since we met, there was nothing left for either of us to say. She whispered that she loved me. I believed she meant it. That no longer mattered. Love without trust is only another promise waiting to fail. I rolled the window up. She stood there while I started the engine. She didn't move. Neither did I. Finally, I shifted into drive and left. I never looked in the mirror. The next morning I met my attorney again. This time the conversation lasted less than 15 minutes. I'd like to file for divorce. He studied my face. Are you certain? I've never been more certain of anything. He nodded once. We'll begin immediately. There was no anger inside me anymore. Only clarity. By the end of the week, every joint account required both signatures. Every automatic payment connected to Nicole's household ended. The mortgage remained her responsibility because the house had always been in her name. The utilities. The insurance. Carter's truck insurance. Avery's college savings account. The monthly transfers I quietly made for groceries. Every payment stopped. Not out of revenge. Out of truth. A man cannot continue supporting people who tried to bury him alive. Nicole called constantly. Sometimes 6 times a day. I answered once. Ethan, please don't do this. I already have. We can fix this. No. Carter made a terrible mistake. No. He was manipulated. No. He needs help. He needs consequences. She cried. I listened. When she finished, I spoke only one sentence. The first time you doubted me was the day our marriage ended. Then I hung up. I never answered another call. News spread quickly after Carter was formally charged. Filing a false police report. Perjury. Conspiracy. Evidence tampering. The investigation uncovered more than anyone expected. Mason confessed first. The jewelry had been hidden inside an abandoned storage unit rented under his older cousin's name. Most of it was recovered. The detectives also discovered months of messages discussing different ways to force me out of the family without Nicole blaming Carter. The theft had simply become their final plan. Avery was never charged. She had encouraged the scheme but had not participated in the burglary itself. That distinction mattered legally. It did not matter to me. She knew. Nicole learned that fact from the investigators. According to my attorney, she broke down during the interview and admitted she had ignored warning signs because she refused to believe her children could deliberately destroy someone's life. Denial has a price. Eventually everyone pays it. 3 months later the divorce became official. Neither of us fought over property. There was nothing worth fighting for anymore. I kept my company. She kept the house. The judge signed the final papers in less than 10 minutes. An entire marriage ended faster than one service appointment. Business recovered slowly. Some customers returned after reading about the trial. Others never did. Trust rebuilds the same way companies do. One careful day at a time. I hired 2 new technicians. Bought another service van. Painted my name across the doors again. Not because I had forgotten what happened. Because I refused to let Carter's lie become the final chapter of my life. Sometimes people ask whether I miss them. They expect hesitation. There isn't any. I miss the family I believed existed. I do not miss the one that actually did. Those are 2 very different things. I spent years thinking sacrifice could earn belonging. I was wrong. Respect must exist before sacrifice means anything. Otherwise, every gift becomes an invitation to be used. Every act of kindness becomes another expectation. Every silent compromise becomes another step toward disappearing inside someone else's life. Walking away was not the hardest decision I ever made. Staying after the truth would have been harder. Some betrayals do not destroy your future. They reveal which future was never real to begin with. If Carter had simply hated me, I might have survived it. If Nicole had simply chosen her children, I might have understood it. But together they chose a lie over the man who carried them for years. That choice ended everything. I never wished for revenge. I wished for truth. Truth arrived. It simply cost more than I imagined. So let me ask you something. If the people you spent years protecting tried to erase your life with a single lie, would you have stayed after proving your innocence? Or would you have walked away exactly as I did?